morning. Welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. Well, nothing in modern history has been quite the mixed blessing and curse like the World Wide Web. The internet has brought a wealth of opportunities to our fingertips, but also a multitude of dangers. False and misleading information, scams and threats to our privacy specifically lurk everywhere. Keeping ourselves safe online is top of mind these days, especially as we have moved to working remotely, socializing online, and looking for love on the internet. Cybersecurity is a constantly moving target as criminals keep finding new ways to break into your shiny new gadgets. And it's not even just about your computer or your smartphone anymore. In fact, smart toys can expose your children's data to cyber criminals. Unchecked webcams could be spying on you as you get ready for bed, and voice assistants could be listening to your uncensored conversations. These days, as attacks become more sophisticated, just teenagers and senior citizens who are at risk, it's also governments and organizations at the highest level. The good news is there are simple ways to keep yourself, your family, and your business or organization safe online. Tonight's panel of experts are going to help you do just that. First, it's my great pleasure to welcome David Masson. David brings over 20 years of experience working in fast-moving security and intelligence environments in both the United Kingdom and in Canada across civilian, military, and diplomatic circles. Prior to Darktrace, where David currently works here in Ottawa as the Director of Enterprise Security with Public Safety Canada, the UK Ministry of Defence, and the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. He regularly advises institutions on insider threats, helping them reduce their vulnerability and level of risk, and also helps businesses navigating the ever-changing security environment. Welcome to the show, David. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me along.
And next, I'd like to welcome Edward Ajeb. He is the founder and president of Nighthawk Strategies, based in Washington, D.C. Edward is a licensed private investigator, a social media intelligence analyst, privacy consultant, author, and international expert on the topics of digital and social media investigations. Welcome, Edward. It's such a pleasure to have you join us tonight.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
And finally, joining us a little bit later in the show on the phone will be cybersecurity expert Monica Eaton-Cardone. She's the co-founder, COO, and owner of Chargebacks 911. That's a fintech company that has successfully protected over 10 billion online transactions for clients in 87 countries. She's also helped her clients recover over 1 billion in stolen or disputed transactions and has advocated for a new Bill of Rights for the outlets, so stay tuned for Monica to join us later on in the show. So the first question I want to ask you, David, is tell us what Darktrace is. What is it exactly that you do for a living?
Okay, Darktrace is the world's leading cyber AI company. We use artificial intelligence, known as AI, to find threat in digital infrastructure, to stop threat and to investigate threat. And one of the reasons we're using AI is because things are so complex, there's too much, and moving too fast, the threat that we face from cyber. Our view is human beings need a hand in the fight. Ways to do that is to use artificial intelligence. This isn't about replacing people, this is about actually helping people fight cybersecurity threat.
And I guess the reason that you would be relying on artificial intelligence is because cybersecurity is moving at such warp speed that human beings can't even keep up with it anymore. And I'm also assuming that artificial intelligence, conversely, is being used by cyber criminals.
Yes, that's about to happen very soon. There's a bit of an unfair fight going on in that the cyber threat actors, the bad guys, the criminals, are getting cleverer, more sophisticated, and their attacks are moving at machine speed, which means human beings are struggling to keep up with that. But at the same time, the people who are trying to defend us are also struggling with increasingly complex and sophisticated networks that they actually have to defend. So that's complex enough, never mind the complexity of the fight they're actually facing. And of course, when the threat actors start using intelligence themselves, we've been seeing hints of that for a couple of years now, At that point, you can't really bring a human being to fight AI. You can't do that. They won't win. You have to use AI to fight AI.
Now, I want to take the conversation back to Edward. I assume your profession has changed a lot, especially in the last year, that the nature of your job has changed from following people physically to going after their digital footprints online. Tell us a little bit about the nature of your profession.
Yeah, so I mainly specialize in helping consumers and businesses in the privacy realm stay safe online and mitigate risk through both an understanding of what kind of information can be exposed online, and then fine-tuning privacy settings and controlling the kind of information that's publicly available. Interestingly, as a private investigator who sort of jumped into this field years ago when all this stuff was sort of evolving, is that you're all right that a lot of investigations now are, rather than boots on the ground, conducting traditional types of surveillance, much of that work has shifted to online realms. So we're looking at things like individual social media to get an idea of what someone associate with. But on the flip side of that, individuals need to be concerned about the kind of information that's exposed about them online, so that any bad actor would not use those techniques to potentially cause harm to those individuals. So it's an interesting field in the sense that social media, technology, and the online world have really expanded both the capabilities and the risks.
Now, Edward, I'm curious to know, what are some of the most common ways in which people slip up online and you're able to gather information? Yeah,
so a lot of time, most people would think that Facebook is the number one social media website, and it is for most purposes. So people have become a little bit more careful about what they share on Facebook, simply because of the data breaches we've had and how much Facebook has been in the news in the last 4 or 5 years. People have really begun to question what they're going to post and how they're going to configure their personas. But then we have a growing number of different social media and social networking websites that the privacy settings aren't quite as clear. You have sites like Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, where people may, as you said, slip up and not realize that that is also information that's exposed for the world to see. So we've seen where someone may be particularly privacy conscious on one social media platform is almost like an entirely different person when you get to the other. So that's one technique that we've used to sort of uncover when we are investigating individuals or businesses doing due diligence or investigating fraudsters.
Edward, when someone says, I don't have social media, I don't have Facebook, is that usually a red flag? I mean, don't most people have some form of social media, even if it's a hidden fake account to creep other people?
Yeah, I think statistics are showing that about 75% or so of adults have at least one social media account. Now, there's been sort of an exodus from Facebook in recent years, and people think it's becoming more of a toxic platform, and they've shifted to others. Now, if someone, certainly the odds are a Facebook account or at least one other social media account. Some people, however, in the margins decide that social media isn't for them, or they'd rather connect with people on a more individual level online rather than on a broadcasting platform. But for someone who has no, I would say that it can raise red flags, certainly sometimes, if it looks like somebody has intentionally tried to hide their digital footprints. But not all the time. I would immediately assume that it would be a red flag, but it is something to definitely look into and consider.
And I imagine that's also highly dependent on the demographic. A younger person who doesn't have social media might raise more eyebrows than an older individual. David, I want to go back to you and ask you, sort of at a higher level, at an organizational and government level, what are some cases you're seeing of these individuals and organizations, cases you've seen recently where cyber attacks have led to grave circumstances?
It's very interesting to hear Edward's comments there on social media. Believe it or not, I didn't get engaged with social media until I was in my mid-50s when I went from government to the private sector. And it was as though I was suddenly born at the age of 54. I never existed before, and then suddenly, pow, I appeared absolutely everywhere. And, and I've got a fairly large social media presence now. And just picking up something that Edward said, it used to be the case that people were very open about what they did in social media. People used to tell the entire world things that they would never turn around and say about themselves to a stranger on the bus, but they do that to the entire world. But that's kind of changed a bit, and we've got some statistics in Canada that showed that last year there was a sudden drop-off in the willingness of Canadians to offer more about themselves in order to get a free product on the internet, where in the past, if it was free, everybody was happy to say anything, not realizing that if it's free, maybe you are actually the product. Bringing it back to your question now, the sort of things that people still slip up on, pretty much it's phishing emails, whether it's phishing or spear phishing emails. Now, phishing is just where somebody sends out an email to literally millions of people in the hope that somebody will click on it, and pretty much somebody somewhere will click on the link or look at the attachment and download some malware. But what we are seeing is increasingly sophisticated, what we call spear phishing attacks. And the reason we say spear phishing is because the attack's aimed right at you. They found you in social media. They've used social media to learn lots of stuff about you. And, anybody's got a Facebook account. If you actually said to them, what could somebody learn about you? They probably learn quite a fair bit. And they then send you an email that's really targeted for you. It's about something you're interested in, or something they realize that you've been doing recently. Like, you say you were at the ball game last weekend. What a great game it was. And somebody tries to pretend to be somebody else. Is at the game, said they saw you. Here's a photograph I took of you and your kids while you were there, just by the by. They're targeting you to get you to click on that link or look at that attachment and then download some malware. And that's still pretty much the most common vector for malware to get into people's homes and to get into government and business. There are lots of other ways that threat actors use. I won't go into them, are fairly complicated to apply to the average citizen. But there's an old saying that there's many ways to skin the cat. And that's absolutely true. And threat actors are prepared to put in the time and effort to find the one that will get them in. And as we said before, they're getting increasingly sophisticated at it.
It's amazing how even the most innocuous, innocent information will be used against us. I want to hear more about the different kinds of scams out there and how we can protect ourselves against them online. But first, we have to go to commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Play 4 games of bingo from the comfort of your own home each Monday at 7 p.m. for your chance to win money from our $2,000 regular bingo or $5,000 super bingo night. Kiwanis TV Bingo, Mondays at 7 p.m. on Rogers TV.
Don't let limited mobility affect your lifestyle.
I want you to push one arm forward.
Whether it's from surgery, an injury, or just time itself, when we move, we can improve our lifestyle. Join Anita Finley each week for a series of workouts that you can do in the comfort of your own home. All you need is a sturdy chair.
This is not about you sitting to watch me. This is about you sitting and joining me.
Tune into Move and Improve right here on Rogers TV.
Every year, dozens of Canadians are killed or seriously injured because they take risks around railway tracks. Talk to your loved ones about rail safety. Visit stoptracktragedies.ca.
Shorty, I like your body, so give it to me tonight. Shorty, I like your body, so give it to me tonight.
Welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. We are joined tonight by special guests David Masson and Edward Ajeb, who are going to teach you how you can stay safe online, whether it's your family, your business, or your organization. We were expecting to be joined by Monica Eaton-Cardone tonight. Unfortunately, she is unable to join us, but we've got lots of great information in store for you. David, I want to go back to you. We were chatting before we went to break about the risks that are involved, the different types of scams that exist out there. We talked about the different types of phishing. And now, as everyone is online now, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, are you seeing any kinds of new trends in terms of fraud, given the mass population that's now online that probably wasn't even there before, and the reliance on things like online shopping and home deliveries?
Believe it or not, last year there wasn't that much innovation in types of cyber attacks. There just were an awful lot more of them. Believe it or not, at the start of last year, ransomware had actually started to drop off. And then once we all started working from home and COVID-19 happened, and it's probably the most common attack that most people will be aware of. We did see a rise in general scams on the internet, and much of that is being driven by COVID-19. People offer information on COVID-19. There was a real thirst and hunger for that kind of information, and people were, guess what, clicking on the links and looking at the attachments, or going to the website that was suggested that would have that kind of information. We'll maybe talk later about how to avoid that. If you need information on something like that, don't wait for somebody to deliver it to you. Go and get it yourself from government authorities. So we saw a lot of people using that to deliver their attacks. With online shopping, it is still the case that people, rather than going to, let's say, Amazon's site itself, they allow people to send them emails to say, hey, there's great bargains on Amazon right now. And that's Amazon with an E at the end, not realizing that's not Amazon's actual account, that's not their web page, but they go to it, or Amazoner, or Amazons, or Amazoners, that kind of thing. Because people, particularly around the time of sales, are in a real hurry to get that bargain, and they don't really engage their critical thinking and actually look at what it is they've been offered, but they just click and they go. And of course, they go to those sites and they give all the details, they give the credit card details, and that tracksuit or pair of training shoes doesn't turn up, but loads of money disappears off their credit card or out of their account.
David, are there any stats available about the cost to the economy and to consumers' purses of digital fraud and online fraud?
There are, and I'm going to say take your pick, but trust me, it's in the billions of dollars, whether that's in Canada or elsewhere. There was an interesting stat came out last year from the Office of the Federal Privacy Commissioner, because it's very Canadian focused. There'd been a new law had come in about reporting breaches where your personal information had been accessed. There was a new law, new breaches being reported, but the Office of the Federal Privacy Commissioner came out and that was actually able to tell us that year, 28 million Canadians had been touched by cyber threat. And if you think about it, that's pretty much the economically active population of the entire country. So if you're looking for a statistic that shows that we can all be touched and affected by it, there's one for you.
Wow, that's quite a sobering statistic, because that's the bulk of our population. I want to go back to Edward and ask you for tips for general privacy. You mentioned privacy settings. Talk to us a little bit about how people can stay safe online who are active users of social media. We are in the age of the influencer. You know, what happens if you've got a follower that becomes an online troll, a keyboard warrior who becomes a cyber bully, or a fan who becomes a little bit too much of a fan and you're afraid of being stalked? What are some things that you need to, some precautions you need to take to stay safe online while also enjoying the community of the internet?
Yeah, so one of the big things that it's really kind of an easy tweak is to periodically review the privacy settings of your social. Privacy settings are changing quite often. So companies like Facebook, Twitter will constantly roll out new privacy policies. And so it's a good idea to every once in a while go in and check to see what's changed or maybe what new features you can customize that you couldn't before. So for example, maybe you want to set your privacy settings so that only your approved friends and followers can see what you post. And then periodically go through who have you added, and maybe who do you want to keep as a friend or a connection on one of those social media accounts, or who maybe do you want to remove as a follower. So the first setup is really checking your privacy settings often and really understanding what implications those settings have. The second is really just a common sense practice among anybody using the internet or sharing information online, is to just be careful what you say and think about how it may be turned into something that could be used against you in a social engineering sense. So avoiding posting things like your mother's maiden name or your exact date of your car. So you kind of see where I'm going with these, because those are the security questions that you often answer to make an online account for Amazon or your bank or something like that. So even sometimes innocuous information like that could be used if it gets in the hands of a bad actor. So just really being cognizant of the sort of windows that you're creating into your life via your social media posts.
Now, Edward, I've always marveled at the fact that most people will take more time to research the restaurant that they'll go to for their next meal or the hotel that they'll stay at on a weekend vacation than a stranger that they might meet online and then let to their intimate lives and around their kids. What kinds of tools are available for the average person out there to do a little bit of a background check on a person that they might not be sure about, whether it's in a romantic relationship or in a friendship?
Yeah, that's definitely true. And romance scams, in fact, are one of the top types of fraud affecting Canadians. In fact, in terms of dollar amount, they're the number one fraud affecting Canadians, according to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. So in 2020 alone, there was Canadians lost over $18.5 million to romance scams. And the average victim was scammed out of over $30,000. So these are huge numbers, because these scammers are professionals really at what they do. Yeah. And they know that it's lucrative. They know that they can prey on somebody's emotions, prey on their economic situation out of the promise of love or relationship. So what folks can do is, especially when you're using online dating resources, is to cross-reference what that person is telling you with other things that you can find online. So social media is a good starting place. Ask questions. If you are engaging in an online or conversation on a dating website, it's within your right to ask about that person's background, or where they may work, or where they where they grew up, and that sort of thing, to establish a baseline. So really start asking questions, and your gut will tell you, and you can look for other red flags if something just doesn't seem to add up, if their timelines don't seem to add up. But other resources that you can use is then go and see if that person is on Facebook, LinkedIn, other sorts of sites, and see if that gives you an additional window. But definitely romance scams are a lot more dangerous than most people realize, and people initially come across as very sincere, but it could lead to some very economically dangerous consequences.
Okay, and so would you then also maybe Google their username, or maybe more innocuous details about their personal life that you may have picked up online?
Yeah, definitely username searching is a big one as well. So if, let's say, for example, if someone has a username of hockey fan 123, you might want to take that username and Google around a little bit and see if there are other social media accounts tied to that username that actually match that person as well. So there are some websites out there that will actually help you do a reverse username search. So you take that username handle and you plug it in, and it tells you what other social media sites that person, that account is registered on. So for example, some sites might be instantusername.com, namevine.com, namecheckup.com. These are just a few that will do some of this efficient Googling for you, so that you can see where else that username pops up. But that's definitely one big identifier to discover additional accounts belonging to that person online.
I want to go back to David and ask you, what are some tips for organizations to help protect themselves?
For organizations, well, first of all, start investing in people and technology. Both are what cause all the benefits of the internet that we're on, and both are what cause all the problems. A lot of people talk about human beings being the weakest link, and there's some truth in that, but let's be honest about it. You wouldn't point at a soccer team, but remember where I am, and say they're all the weakest link, because they're not. They're what makes the strength of the team, and human beings are what make us strong. But in this, on the internet, and in the way some of the things that Ed was just describing there, you're letting human beings down if you don't give them good training in the first place, and give them good information, and give them a good understanding of what the internet's about, all the benefits and the pitfalls, and actually start teaching them how to be safe on the internet. But at the same time, you've got to give them technology as well, because if you don't get them good technology, they're probably going to fail. It's a combination of both those issues.
Okay, well, thank you so much, David. We're just about to go to commercial break, but when we come back, we'll hear more from Edward Jeb and David Masson on how to stay safe online.
Join us as we look back at previous investiture ceremonies honoring great Canadians. Watch the Order of Canada exclusively on Rogers TV.
For the latest, listen to City News 1011.
More news around the arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine.
Find out what's happening in Ottawa and the Valley.
Affordable housing crisis deepens amid the latest LRT.
With breaking news as it happens and candid conversation from The Rob Snow Show. Stream City News on your device or listen at 1011 FM. Number one for local news. This is City News 1011.
Are you a woman experiencing abuse? Do you know a woman experiencing abuse? Help is available any time of day or night. Sheltersafe.ca is an online map that helps you find a women's shelter or transition house that meets your needs so you can live a life free from violence. Sheltersafe.ca. Help is just a click away.
Hi, I'm Harriet Clooney. Come check out my show, Scrap Cooking, where I'm going to show you how to use the bits and bobs, the ends, pieces of things that you might otherwise throw in the compost. I'm going to show you how to turn them into something delicious.
Hi, welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour. On tonight's show, we're talking about how to stay safe online. Now, a recent article in Vice reported the story of a fellow who was sitting at home with his private parts wrapped in an internet-connected chastity cage when he suddenly got a weird message on the app that connects to the device. A hacker said that they took over control and they demanded Bitcoin payments to release him. And the poor fellow basically ran out of money and had to physically break open the chastity cage using some bolt cutters. And after a few scars and a fair bit of trauma, he sort of vowed off ever using internet-connected devices again. So my question to our guest tonight is, what's the moral of the story? Is a physical lock sometimes safer than the cases? When is old school the best school? When do we get caught up in this false belief that just because it's password protected, we're safe? Let's start with you, David.
Well, crikey, it's a really difficult one. For that chap there, although we're all having don't forget, some people have had their cameras turned on, not realised it, then been extorted, and it's had very, very serious consequences for them, very tragic endings, actually. A lot of these internet-connected devices, you may not realize that they're actually on all the time. In fact, internet-connected TVs, some of them, I won't mention the brand products now, if you actually read the instructions, they say to you not to have sensitive conversations near the TV.
Wow.
They actually tell you this. People don't read it, they don't realize it, and some of them will actually say, do not have sensitive conversations even if you think you've switched it off. So there you go. You'll know things are wrong when if you crack and Siri starts laughing, then your Alexa device starts laughing as well. That'll give you an idea of what these things can actually do. Some things you can absolutely switch off, and I mean you really do disconnect the power from them. But in many ways there are products out there that means you don't actually have to do that. They will stop various things, they'll stop communications, they'll block people for you, that kind of thing. But you need to be saying to yourself, if what you're doing online is such that you suddenly feel the need to literally unpower the house because of what you're doing, you might want to actually consider maybe it's what you're doing on the internet's the issue rather than the others you're interacting with or those who've come on and threatened you.
So in some cases the benefits obviously don't outweigh the risks. Now I want to ask you, Edward, have you ever had situations where you were able to garner quite a bit of information about someone you were looking for through an internet connected device?
Yeah, for internet connected devices, it comes down to a matter of convenience versus privacy. So if you really value the convenience of these new devices and the value that they bring to you, then a lot of people will opt for that. But it's really important for consumers to understand the privacy implications of those devices. So there was a case here in the United States where law enforcement were able to subpoena the device manufacturer for transcripts of an audio conversation between two people that was going to be used in evidence for a murder case. And the way these devices work is that in order for the device to continuously learn how to understand your language, it has to take that audio clip, send it back to their servers and interpret it and translate it, and then spit out the result or the information that you're looking for. So that clip is actually being transmitted to other computers on the internet, to other services, other companies. As soon as you plug it in and connect your account, you've agreed to their privacy policy. So there have been cases here in the U.S. where that information, when people didn't even know they were being listened to, has been used in court.
Now, what about insurance companies getting our health information from those smartwatches or those fitness trackers? I mean, should I be concerned about there being a log of my couch potato behavior out there somewhere?
Yeah, those are definitely it.
David,
David, you can take it.
I was just going to say, well, there you go. Barbara, did you actually read all the paperwork that came with it when you put it on?
Well, I think like most people, I just scroll down to the end, tick the yes box, and go on with my life. And I think that's a big mistake we all make of not reading the fine print.
For some of these things like Fitbits, and I'm sitting here, I've got the Garmin watch on. I'm amazed it tells me. Most of the time that's probably going to be okay, but if you think about it, there are benefits, or there will be benefits from AI understanding your health records, because the whole idea is to be involved in preventative care rather than you get sick and then you try and do something about it. But there are other cases where you begin to wonder just what's the cumulative effect of this slow drip of information about individuals that are being fed back to other organizations, basically giving up your rights to have any of that sort of information. And Barbara, that's one of the reasons why you see an increase in legislation in countries like America and Canada, where it's starting to give the rights back to the human beings to enforce those rights. So for instance, the right to have yourself entirely forgotten by a company. But the issue there is, of course, and Edward touched on it, the difference between convenience and actually doing the right thing is whether people will bother to do it.
Now, Edward, going back to you as a private investigator, would you basically advise a client from ever getting an internet-connected device?
No, not necessarily. I think that they are, there's definitely a lot of privacy and cybersecurity thought that goes into these devices. And certainly these companies don't want total hysteria going on over these products, because They want to protect consumers, and they want people to understand that there's privacy and that they are safeguarding their information. And really, it's just about how comfortable a consumer is with knowing that that company has control over that information, over those algorithms, over that data. So if you trust Google, Facebook, Amazon, these companies, and you trust their cybersecurity experts from anyone who may be trying to conduct a malicious attack against their network to try to steal that data, then the convenience might be worth it for you. But I do think that people who certainly these sorts of devices are not allowed in government buildings, inside of SCIFs, and SCIF is like a safe room inside of a government building that handles top secret information. So there is a reason for that. There is a reason because that information shouldn't be transmitted anywhere else, even if it's to another computer or an inanimate object. So for the average consumer, I would just advise them or advise a client to think about the types of information that you're going to be discussing or providing into this machine or software or device, and if the convenience is worth that trade-off of knowing that your data is being collected and stored elsewhere.
Now, I'm often struck by the number of instances throughout a day that a consumer is asked for their personal information, for your name when you go to Starbucks, for your address and email if you sign up for a loyalty card at a grocery store or a pharmacy, every time you order a pizza, for instance, and every time if you're giving your real email and your real name and your real address and then your preferences for, let's say, the medication that you buy at the pharmacy or the pizza that you order. Is there a way for this information to be cross-referenced somehow and built up and used against you? And, I ask this within the context of wondering, in the 20th century, our personally identifying information included things like our birth date or our credit card number or our social insurance number. Is it going to be different in the 21st century? Could other things be used against us that we have no way of knowing? I want to ask you, Edward, and then back to David.
Yeah, definitely. This type of information is what companies collect so they can get to better know their consumers. So when you shop online or when you scan your loyalty card at the cash register of a store, and they keep a catalog of what you're buying so that they can better market to you as a consumer. So if they see that you're buying lots of organic food and maybe you don't buy dairy very often, then they'll be able to understand you as a consumer and market to you because of that information they collect. They use it for those purposes to help their marketing efforts and consumer opinion efforts. But once again, that data is being collected by a third party, by that company, who may or may not, in the terms of service for that loyalty program, have permission to sell that to other marketing companies, to data brokers. And that is a huge issue here in the States, where you enter into a sweepstakes, so you write your information down to get a free cup of coffee, but then they sell it all over the place, and before you know it, your home address or your phone number is in these public registries. Not so much a problem in Canada, from my understanding, that it's not those websites aren't quite as popular, but definitely that information is being used by those companies that are using it for those marketing purposes. If you, I'm sorry, it's the question of, is a malicious actor going to be able to hack into that system or use that data for nefarious purposes?
It's almost like the modern day equivalent of giving up your firstborn in exchange for something very small. So you better give it some thought as to whether handing is really worth the price of that free cup of coffee. Now, David, would you advise your clients to use a throwaway email or to build an alias for this kind of purpose?
Well, it's a sad day if in our private lives we suddenly have to start developing aliases just to get around town. So I wouldn't necessarily have to do that. To be honest with you, I've been giving out rubbish emails and fake dates of birth for myself for a long time now, because I just can't be bothered getting spammed afterwards. And funnily enough, I was talking to Edward in one of the breaks where clearly some spam companies think I'm a woman. And I used to wonder why that was, but now I do actually recall telling some people, just writing down ticking female instead of male, because what the heck, why not? But maybe that's why I'm getting female spam now. But there we go. But there are some things that you can't avoid giving up. There was a big fuss about facial recognition company that had been working in Canada last year. They're still working in the States, where people suddenly discovered that their pictures were on a database. And they had no idea about that, and people could access that database. And your facial recognition, particularly your irises, are you. You can't fake that. You can't make that up. And people don't realize that in some countries, when you're walking around, you are giving that up. It's been taken, it's been stored in a database, and it's there for absolute. And do you remember when these things called Google Glasses came out? They weren't very popular, but they went away. Something like that's probably going to come back again. And imagine if you're walking down the street and somebody goes past you and they've got a pair of fancy glasses that can catch your image, catch your retina, quickly search it on a database, tell this individual who you are, and as they walk past, they go, "Hey, hi, David, happy birthday for yesterday." It'll be quite a shock for you to discover that. But that's going to be quite possible quite soon through facial recognition.
Scary stuff, and I want to talk to you more, David, about new emerging manipulative technologies like deepfake. But first, we're going to a commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
Send them home. Get rid of them. Gentlemen, please.
And so, this organ, which I regret I cannot name because of the presence of these members of the weaker sex, who, although they are married, could not possibly endure.
Get them out.
Patience, Ginny. Patience.
Get them out.
Dr. McFarlane!
Mrs. Trout.
There's no place for women in a medical school. Get them out.
If you do not bring this classroom under control, I am going to repeat every word of this disgusting lecture to your charming wife.
My friend Jenny Trout was not the only woman to face this kind of thing in medical school. But she would become the first woman licensed to practice medicine in Canada.
That he fell. Whoa, I'm not driving. I'm way too stoned. How are you feeling, beer?
Oh, since we had that talk, I'm not driving tonight at all.
What about you, Dave?
You only had a couple of drinks.
And only a couple of puffs.
I don't drink and drive. No way I'm getting behind the wheel when I smoked weed, too.
How are we getting home, then?
Oh, you can drive, Dave.
Come on, Dave.
Take one for the team, buddy.
Don't let weed and alcohol influence your decision to drive.
Yeah, I need a ride.
October 5th, 2014, my daughter was hit by a train. She was walking along the sides of the tracks, and it shattered her world.
Back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and on tonight's show, we're talking about how to keep yourself safe online. Now, before we went to break, David, we were talking about the emergence of new technologies that are not just stealing your identity, but also certain elements of your physical appearance. And to that end, I wanted to bring up this new emerging manipulative technology called deepfake. Now, a new report by Deep Trace says 96% of deepfake video clips are essentially non-consensual pornography, where artificial intelligence is used to manipulate existing porn videos to appear to feature other people. This is absolutely horrifying. David, talk to us about what's happening and how we can protect ourselves from that.
Yeah, that issue's been around for a while. They weren't particularly, I don't want to use the word quality here when we're talking about pornography. They weren't particularly good fakes, but they were enough, obviously, to cause distress to those people who've been victimized. However, deepfake videos and deepfake voice imitations are getting better and better and better. I remember a couple of years ago on a Chinese television station, one of the presenters was actually deepfake, and if you looked at them, you thought it looked a bit odd, a bit too smooth-skinned. It didn't look quite right, but that's becoming increasingly different. Maybe some people saw some TikTok videos of a fake American film star, I'm not going to mention his name, that been floating around in the last couple of days. They look pretty good to me. I thought, yep, that's him all right, but it wasn't. It was completely fake. And much of this is actually generated by artificial intelligence. It's where artificial intelligence comes up with an image of somebody and it throws it at another piece of artificial intelligence which says, no, that's not him or her. Try better. Here's my version. And they just do this millions of times. And eventually you get a really good deep fake video that will convince people. And that's already happened with voices. There was a business fraud, maybe Edward knows about this one, end of last year, where AI had faked a company boss's voice, and they used it to ring somebody up and do a wire transfer of thousands of dollars into somebody else's account because people were convinced this actually is the boss who's asking me to do this. So that's already happened, and it's just going to get, I don't want to use the word better or improve, but that's effectively what's going to happen. They're going to get better and they'll be increasingly improved, and they will be very, very, very convincing.
So other than becoming hermits and removing all our traces off the internet and not talking to anyone, what can we do to protect ourselves?
So start realizing that this is happening. That's what it is. The internet and being interconnected is a way of life. We have to start accepting this as a way of life and getting used to it. And at the same time, then, all the features that we can do to make ourselves safer, just start regarding them as facts of life, ways of life. We essentially live inside machines now, and I'm connected to one right now. Barbara, you're probably plugged in all over the place.
I'm like a cyborg.
Connected into a machine here. Well, exactly, but we already are. And just start getting relaxed about it. That's the way things are. What are the things I can do to make myself safer? In the way that when you're little, you get taught how to cross the road safely. I'm not kidding, that's how basic it has to be. So for things like, if you receive a video of your grandmother, and you think, why is grandmother sending me a video of herself? She's never done that before, but it clearly is grandmother, and she's asking me to send her my bank account details. You might think, well, just take a stop a minute, deep breath. Grandmother doesn't know how to do this. She'd never ask my banking details. This is a fake. Do you know what I think I'll do? I think I'll phone the cops and tell them that this has actually happened. We're just going to have to get used to that, but not get worried about it, not get paranoid about it. Just start engaging our brains a bit more when we receive emails or texts or social media messages or whatever that are enticing us to do something that just seems slightly odd.
And the demand for critical thinking is increasing in our fast-paced world of social media. And Edward, I want to ask you, as someone who makes a living out of getting information, what do you do to avoid being sent down the garden path? How can you tell what information is real and what isn't? What advice do you have for people out there who have all this information at their fingertips and they're not sure, well, is this fake news? Is this real? How can you even tell anymore?
Yeah, it's definitely a big challenge because we're trying to, on the one hand, promote a society that asks questions and has a healthy level of skepticism, of opinions. But then on the other hand, you have companies or even bad actors, individual bad actors, who are manipulating people into thinking and reading and consuming information that's just not true. So in everyday life, you're going to encounter when you finding information online, things that are just not true or manipulated or spun up in a certain way to make you have a certain reaction to it. And I really think that a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of critical thinking, even just 10% of skepticism will solve about 90% of those issues. So if someone is coming to you with an email asking for your bank information and it looks like your boss, check the email out a little bit. Sometimes they will take your boss's name and add a letter on the end of it, or make a free email address with Google or whoever, and try to impersonate somebody that is looks like the person that you want to talk to, but it's really not. So just using a little bit of that skepticism and critical thinking and examining something just a little bit closer, you'd be able to avoid a significant amount of those fraud and scams online.
Now, David, my makeup artist was just telling me this morning about how her fiance's phone suddenly went dark. And when he called his cell phone provider, they told him that someone was actively trying to steal his phone number. And he was frantically changing his passwords in the middle of the night. And this was right here in Ottawa. How can something like this happen? I've never heard of something like this before.
Yes, I think this is called SIM swapping. This actually, Edward, this might be more your thing, but as I understand it, what they effectively do is they swap your SIM card. You think, well, how the hell did they do that? Because they couldn't have access to my phone. What they do is they convince a phone company, somebody on a help desk somewhere, that they're you, and that their phone's got busted and they need a new number. And that's effectively what happens. Edward, hopefully I've got that right. I think that's what SIM swapping does. And effectively, they then take over your phone. And I mean everything on your phone. Now, I don't happen to live on my phone because I only got into smartphones in the last 10 years, but some people, their entire lives are on their phones. And basically, a threat actor suddenly got hold of that. And it's an absolutely eating thing to happen to people. It's a big shock, and I'm sure the individual you just mentioned there's probably still in shock about it, but it is possible. Edward, did I get that right? SIM swapping?
Yes. Yeah, David, you got it absolutely right. You explained it perfectly.
Now, how can we keep our SIM cards and our USB devices and our external hard drives safe? Any tips on that?
Well,
so
be careful what you plug them into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. David, talk to us a little bit about the importance of using a VPN versus, let's say, using the incognito mode in your browser or a search engine like DuckDuckGo.
Okay. VPNs are always a good idea to have them, particularly when you're away from home. Free Wi-Fi isn't safe, okay? It's not safe. Don't do financial or sensitive interactions over free Wi-Fi unless you really have to, and if you really have to, then use a VPN, because that'll keep what you're doing private from the rest of the internet. I would strongly encourage people who've got their senior citizens within the family to start helping them with stuff like being careful about what they do in free Wi-Fi and maybe installing a VPN. These are all good things to do. But you know what? That in some ways, if you go even more basic, how about just a strong password? And I mean a properly strong password, and stop using the same password for absolutely everything you do. You probably saw a story a couple of weeks ago where the Canadian Revenue Agency suddenly shut down their services to over 100,000 people at this time of year as well. That's because they discovered on the dark web that these people were using the same password for just about everything, and those passwords had been exposed, stolen from somewhere else and exposed on the internet. This really does happen. So strong password and not the same password for everything. And you'll be on your way to a much, much safer life on the internet.
Now, what is the dark web? Is that like another layer of the internet that most people don't have access to?
Well, funnily enough, we do all have access to it, but you just got to find out how to get there. Most of the internet that we're used to, that we see, is quite literally the very, very tip of the iceberg. Most of the internet is the dark web, and you can't see it. What I mean by that is, in the internet that we're on, you can go into Google Engine and type anything and it will go find it for you. On the dark web, you can't do that. You have to actually know the site that you want to go and look at. It's not searchable. It's not searchable at all. That's really what the dark web is. And because it's not searchable, it means that threat actors and people who want to get up to pretty much bad stuff.
Your practice that just because you delete information off of your computer, off your device, doesn't mean that it's gone forever. How can you make sure that your devices are wiped clean? What steps do you have to take?
Yeah, that's a really important question, because especially if you're getting rid of an old phone or old computer, you want to make sure that the person is not going to be able to recover any data off of your hard drive. There are tools out there that are used by companies and can be used by the average consumer as well that will securely delete your information. So they will basically write a bunch of ones and zeros all over your hard drive, so any data like that is not recoverable. There's a lot of software. I have not have one particular one in mind, because there's always new ones coming up. But the most major companies, like the antivirus software companies, do have secure file deletion software. And I'd recommend doing, if you're ever going to get rid of a computer, is to use one of those software programs to completely wipe it from any kind of recovery.
Now, what about images? How much information can you get from an image that's posted on the web? I mean, can you get the address of the person when they were posting the image, and how can you wipe that clean next time you're uploading a selfie to Instagram?
Yeah, thankfully, the social media websites will erase what's called metadata from the images that you upload. So when you take a picture with your cell phone is saving certain information about that picture, like when it was taken, what time. Sometimes it will even tag the location of where you took that photo, unless you have disabled that in your phone settings. Thankfully, when you upload a photo to Facebook or Twitter, or Instagram or many other social media sites, they compress that image so it loads faster for users, and they also remove a lot of that metadata, thankfully. But I think what consumers should be aware about is that there do exist free reverse image search tools on the internet where someone could take a picture, plug it into a reverse image search engine such as Google or Bing, that have a reverse image search function, and find where else on the internet that image exists. So it's definitely something to be aware of and be careful where and what you post, because this technology does exist to trace where else that image may be found.
And I guess that's also a great way to determine whether someone you've met online, let's say on a dating site, is legit, because if they're posting photos that have appeared in other places, then clearly they're tricking you about their identity. Now, Edward, I know you've got a number of tools and tips for people on your website. Tell us a little bit about some of the resources that are available and where they can find them.
Yeah, absolutely. So on my website, you can find, I've created a dedicated page for viewers to find out more about some of the tools I've mentioned here, reverse image searching, username searching. So that will be nighthawkstrategies.com/RogersTV. And that's where I'll post some useful links for consumers who might want to do some amateur dating detective work and other types of online research.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Edward. Now we are almost at the end of our time together. David, any really quick parting thoughts for our audience tonight? Where can we find you and what you're up to?
Well, you can get me at www.darktrace.com. You'll see me in there, and you'll see I write quite a few blogs on cybersecurity. Can I just say a couple of parting thoughts before we go?
Oh, we only have about 30 seconds left.
Change the passwords on your internet-connected devices at your home, and do it now.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Edward, to you both for your time, your wisdom, and your insights tonight. Lots to chew on, lots to mull over. If you're watching the show tonight, don't forget to check out Edward's website for more resources and tools and strategies. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a great evening. We'll see you again in the studio next week.
Call the Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.